advocacy and information sharing, and also any topics or questions that you might have for future meetings, so we can make this year as useful as possible. So this was supposed to be back in February, but of course time got away from me and everyone else. So thanks for still sticking around and joining for today. So I'll pass now to Sunila to talk through the work of the Immigrant Women Speak Out Association of New South Wales.
Thanks, Anne. I have a presentation which I would like to share.
And you're on mute, but Sunila, that should be fine.
I'm on mute. Am I? Is it okay?
No, you're not. Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I always find it a challenge to share on Teams. I'm so used to. Can you see it? Can you see the presentation?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yep, that looks great.
Great, thank you. So I can't see anybody now. So if you can't see the presentation halfway through, please let me know. So Immigrant Women Speak Out. I don't know how many of you have heard about us. So we are a key women's organization which is run by migrant women for migrant women. So it empowers migrant women to live a life free of violence, oppression, exploitation, and discrimination. So the vision of Speak Out is to have a society that values the rich and diverse contributions of immigrant and refugee women. And we use a strength-based, person-centric approach to provide a wraparound services for migrant and refugee women who are either homeless or on the verge of becoming homeless due to domestic and family violence. So we have 4 core projects. Homeless Multicultural Women's Integrated Support Service, or HomeWiz as it is called. Immigrant Resource Center, so that is again IWRC, Multicultural Women's Shelter and Advocacy. So HomeWiz, which is the Homeless Multicultural Women's Integrated Support Service, is a project which is managed by 3 caseworkers or project officers. And the services we offer are cultural understanding and cultural specific support, understanding the situation of the client and explaining the options that are available to them, providing support in their decision-making, providing referrals to services such as counseling, court advocacy, financial assistance, social support, etc. Assistance in accessing the family violence provisions, information on safety planning and risk management, and individual case management and co-case management. We receive our referrals, either they are self-referrals or we receive referrals from 1-800-RESPECT, DV line, fax, immigration department, and other service providers. And we have a no wrong door policy, so nobody is turned back. Our next project is the Immigrant Women's Resource Center. The main purpose of this program is to increase engagement, networking, reducing isolation, making friends, and also skills development. The sewing classes equip the clients to be financially independent. So we organize regular women's get-togethers. We celebrate important days such as Women's Day, Harmony Day, Mother and Daughter Day, and so on. We have English conversational classes. Some of our clients cannot speak English. So we teach them conversational English so that they can communicate with the service providers, with the government agencies, and so on. We also have computer literacy classes. Women come to us to learn how to use the computers. So we help them create their email addresses and online accounts with immigration department, Centrelink, etc. Then we have the sewing classes. Women learn to sew various things such as shopping bags, handbags, table runners, quilting using spare pieces of cloth. And they also learn alteration, which equips them to be financially independent. Same with the flower making classes. We also organize picnics and bus trips to reduce their isolation. And these trips are very, very popular with the women. Our shelter is managed by the executive officer with the assistance of all Speak Out staff on a voluntary basis. It provides temporary accommodation for single women from culturally and linguistically diverse background. Most of these women cannot access other accommodation services due to their visa status. Most of them are on temporary visas, and sometimes they are no longer eligible because they have used up all the services that are available to them. 90% of our clients are on temporary visas. Some of our challenges are, along with other challenges which everyone working in the sector faces, working with multicultural women have some more challenges, such as isolation. Most of our clients are isolated from their families, their culture, and do not have any social support here. They have limited understanding of their rights and the support that is available. They are subject to misidentification due to language barriers. This means that victim is sometimes identified as a perpetrator. So normally what happens is, if the police are called, they talk to the victim. The victim cannot understand what they're saying. If the woman keeps on saying yes, yes, yes to everything, and in that situation, the partner is fluent in English, so he can explain the whole situation from his perspective. And so there have been instances where the victims are issued AVOs against them rather than the other way around. So this is a big risk that we have in the multicultural communities where English is not the first language. Then there is fear of deportation if they complain. The perpetrator constantly threatens that they will be deported if they complain to anyone. And because of the cultural stigma of going back to the country after marriage in this way, they do not approach the authorities. And the limited family violence provisions due to visa status. This is our biggest challenge. And to put a positive spin on this, this is where our expertise lies. The victims arrive in Australia on specific visas, anywhere from partner visa to related bridging visas, such as the visas that are listed here. The perpetrator can cancel his sponsorship at any time while the application is being processed, leaving the victim with no support. So if you look at the provisional partner visa class 309, that is normally applied in the country of origin. But because of COVID-19, the government has made some modification where it can be granted even while they are here. Then there is a prospective marriage visa, partner visa. A new trend is emerging these days, and that is that the new brides are brought on tourist visa, promising that they will apply for a spouse visa once they arrive here. If all goes well, no problem. If not, and the application is withdrawn, then the woman is left with a tourist visa, normally with no working rights. Similarly, with student visa, they study and attend their classes. If they meet somebody here, or if there's somebody they get romantically involved with, if everything works okay, that's fine. If they're subjected to domestic and family violence, it impacts their studies. And if they leave the relationship, then they are no longer the spouse of the primary applicant, and therefore at risk of having their visas cancelled. Some more challenges. Some bridging visa holders have no work rights. Clients who are here on tourist or visitor visa have no work rights. Speak Out advocates on their behalf and applies for change in circumstances for their visa in order to allow them to work. Some of these women are spouses of Australian citizens, and instead of bringing them on partner visa, like I said earlier, they're brought on tourist visa. Sometimes they delay the application for so long that some even have children here. The children become Australian citizens by descent. And then there is the added fear of deportation for the mother, as she is not allowed to take the children back with her if at all she is deported. So main reason where women with children do not complain. Then there are lengthy processing times. Sometimes it takes more than a year to get the outcome of their visa applications. If the relationship goes well, like I said, no problem at all. If not, during this waiting time, most of the women are not eligible for any support at all. Even clients with permanent residency have a waiting period before they can access Centrelink payments. Then there are mental health issues, the stress and depression due to uncertainty about the future. The complexity of these issues for women, especially with no income, leads to increased mental distress, and they require intensive support case management. And guess what? It's not available to them. Housing and accommodation. Women on temporary visas are not eligible for emergency accommodation. This is the reason why Speak Out established the Multicultural Women's Shelter. Our shelter always receives high volume of referrals. However, it is not funded by the government. We survive on small grants, but we know that there is an acute need. Speak Out operates the shelter supported by staff on a voluntary basis. The shelter provides 12 weeks temporary accommodation, most of the times at no cost to the occupants. However, after these 12 weeks, there is no transitional accommodation that we can access. Most of the transitional accommodations are available only to permanent residents or to the citizens. As a result, with current private rental crisis, we have to allow them to stay longer, as otherwise they will be homeless, which defeats the whole purpose of providing them shelter in the first place. We are hoping that these clients who are currently slipping through the cracks are better supported and can avail of the accommodation pathways to ease homelessness. But everything is not so gloomy. Here's a success story. One fine day, Jo called. She was nervous and distressed. She told us that during COVID-19 lockdown, she was stuck at home with her violent husband. She did her best not to make him angry. She made him nice breakfast, lunch, dinner, cleaned the house, and did all the household chores. But she was so scared that often she would not be able to sleep at night. Her husband was later diagnosed to be schizophrenic. The constant kicking and hitting by her husband took a toll on her. Her culture does not accept a woman leaving her marriage. Her relatives advised her to stay, sort out the differences, and continue the relationship. But when she tried talking to the husband, he became more angry. He stopped her from attending English lessons at TAFE. He always wanted her to be home. She was not allowed to socialize with anyone, to make friends with anyone. Her husband was unemployed and always at home, so she could never get away from him. Her family overseas came across Immigrant Women Speak Out website. They gave Jo our phone number. Gathering all the courage she had, she decided to call Speak Out. Fortunately for her, our shelter had a vacancy. Jo was provided accommodation straight away. She was given food vouchers and Opal card. She was also provided other much needed support. She was guided on how to apply for financial assistance through Red Cross. Jo was successful in that application. During the first support session with the caseworker, Jo asked if she could get counseling, as she was always fearful and anxious. From then on, she had regular therapeutic counseling sessions. The caseworker also helped Jo navigate the government system, guided her to fill the relevant application forms, provide supporting evidence, and finally she got what she wanted. She was granted permanent residency. During this time, Jo learned to speak English. She learned basic computer skills at a resource center. She then secured employment in a coffee shop. The shop owner was patient and kind. He wanted to make a difference in her life, to help her in her journey. She was a quick learner. She learned the skills and now she is a barista. She has now moved out of the shelter. She is a confident young woman who's independent and settled. It is stories like this that make all our efforts worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sunila. That's is really, really wonderful to hear the work of the Immigrant Women Speak Out Association, especially in a space where there isn't the resourcing. particularly for women on temporary visas, as I think everyone in this room knows. Were there any questions that people had for Sunila? Just seeing if there's any.
Thank you.
I just had one question.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I just wondered if that the service is available to regional community. So the case management that you were talking about, is that available over phone or Zoom, or do they need to be local?
We are, our area designated by DCJ is from Western Sydney right up to Blue Mountains. But we have a no wrong door policy, and Department of Immigration sends us clients from across Australia. So telephone support, we can provide anyone from anywhere. That's not a problem at all. And then we guide the client to the local services in her area so that she can continue further.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think there was another hand up.
Yeah, I guess it's me. Yep. Yeah, thank you for that. And sorry, I was late. So I don't know what area you were talking. So first thing I would like to know about that women's shelter in that area. And I also want to know what other services are available if a visa holder, like a woman going through the domestic violence and she's here on temporary visa, what other housing options are there, because especially they're homeless.
Housing options, government housing options, nothing. Because for you to be in the housing queue, you have to either be a permanent resident or a citizen.
Yeah.
So our clients, once they finish their time and once they are financially independent, 2 or 3 of them get together and go for private rental.
Okay, so
till they get secure in their jobs and start earning more, they share private rental accommodation, because we have no access to intermediate accommodation.
Social housing and everything. Okay, now so the basically is the sharing house.
Yes, sharing house. That's the only option at this stage for women on temporary visas. And that is also getting more and more challenging due to the rental crisis, because these women have no rental history, because they're and the house is in partner's name. And besides, when their only payment option available, payment they receive could be either Centrelink or their salary that they receive. But because of not having rental history, even though the women apply, it's very hard to get the house. And so women don't leave our shelter, they just stay, which makes it harder for us to get new clients.
Okay, yeah, because I know if they don't have any rental history, and especially if they have a little child, then it's make even worse to share house or so I was just wondering if there is any other options.
No, we provide them all letters of support. We provide them anything that they need and guarantees and stuff, and that's how they get the accommodation. And it used to be okay till this rental crisis started.
Yeah. Okay, now thank you.
Were there any other hands up or questions? Can't see any. Sunila, can I ask, in terms of the refuge, what's the capacity of it?
It's six single women.
But I guess you're also supporting women who are not in the refuge, so
yes, of
providing
course.
the casework. Yes,
we have around 200 clients per year who we support, and the shelter accommodates 6 at a time.
Wonderful. Well, it was really lovely to hear about the. Oh, there's another question from Sarah at JRS. Did you want to come off mute, Sarah?
Yes. Hi, Sunila. Thank you so much for all the services that you provide. So we basically work with a similar cohort with women.
Yes, I know JRS.
Yes, yes. So I just have a general question.
Sure.
About stories we've heard from women in general. sometimes they are in a refuge and for some reason they're told to go to a hotel for 24 hours. So they are kicked out of refuges and they're told to go to a hotel for 24 hours. And then after that, the client is homeless. It happened a few times. So I was wondering if you know what are the reasons usually behind that?
I can't hear you clearly, Sarah, but the
Oh.
only thing that I can tell you is that we receive several such clients who have been kicked out of the previous shelter because they have run out of time. And while we understand that you can't keep anybody forever, so if we have a vacancy, we do accommodate these clients. At the moment, we have one such client who told us that her belongings were put on the footpath and she had nowhere to go. But then again, if we don't have space in the shelter, then we have to turn them away as well. Because it is very hard to find a shelter for women on the visas that they are, because there are hardly any.
So if you have vacancy and they live in your refuge or your shelter, like what's the time limit approximately for them to stay in your shelter?
The time that we give them is 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
Which is 4 months approximately.
Yep.
But hardly anyone lives within that time. When I say that they don't because they don't have anywhere to go and not a steady income.
Right.
So we have a woman now who can't speak English, but she's a great gardener. She has a huge garden of small succulents. So we are trying to talk to Bunnings and see if she can get a position there in the gardening section. But she can't speak a language. So the way she communicates with us, I mean, she didn't want to learn English because she's been here in Australia for 5 years with an Australian husband. And the way they communicated was Google Translate. And so that's what she prefers to use. So I forced her to attend our English classes. I said, if you want to stay here, you must attend these English classes because living in a country which speaks English and resisting speaking English, but she has other skills, like she has green fingers. So I'm hoping something will come out of it. I'm also looking at the possibility of taking her little succulent pots to the weekly market somewhere and see if she can get the money that way. So fingers crossed. We have to come up with creative ideas.
We have English classes if she's ever interested.
So if anyone has any gardening job anywhere in your areas, let us know.
We have English classes. So.
Thank you very much.
I think there's one other question from Nat again. Nat, did you want to come off mute?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. I just wondered, I may have missed this, the location of the shelter. What suburb?
It's close to Parramatta.
Close to Parramatta. Okay.
Yeah.
And referral process?
Our referral forms are on our website.
On the website. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
but they can even call us on the phone, and that's okay.
Okay. Wonderful.
We don't stick to any rigid rules because as it is, these women have suffered so much because of the rules around us, around various things. So yeah,
fair enough.
A phone call is enough too.
Wonderful. Were there any last questions for Sunila? No. Thank you so much, Sunila, again for stepping in last minute. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anne, for the opportunity.
And I think everyone's really benefited from hearing of the work of your organisation, especially in like such a difficult space to work in, where there's not basically any government support or funding. So it's really amazing work. So you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting as well. And I'll just ask, are slides available? Did you want to share them around later? Or if there's anything to share around, you can email it to Livia and myself, and we can send it out after the meeting as well.
Are you talking to me, Anne, or to Sarah?
Yeah, sorry. To
So
you.
I'm happy to send my slide pack, but it is just what you saw. It's only pictures, nothing else.
No worries. That's true. All right. Well, so then we'll move on now to Sarah, the Sector Development Manager from DV New South Wales. Sorry, I can't. So there you are. Did you have slides or anything to share as well?
I do. I'll share my slides.
Wonderful.
And apologies, I'm just off the back of a cold, so sorry if I'm a bit husky. Can you see those? Not yet. Oh. I can't see those, so okay, so thank you very much for having me, everyone. Before I get started, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're coming on. We're all meeting from today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I will give a quick overview of the Good Practice Guidelines. We developed these in 2017 initially, so DV New South Wales launched our original Good Practice Guidelines in 2017 to really reinforce the practices that have been developed over decades of expertise by experienced domestic and family violence services. And a huge amount of work and consultation went into these. One of the things I think that obviously has changed since 2017 is, you know, our knowledge and our awareness of DV has really evolved over that time and understanding. So we used COVID as an opportunity to take stock and review the Good Practice Guidelines. We partnered with the University of New South Wales, the Gendered Violence Research Network, to do an independent review. And from this work, they talked to member services and did a range of surveys and also consultations in terms of focus groups. So some of the key findings that came out of that review was that almost 90% of respondents use the guidelines in the course of their work. And nearly all the survey participants either agreed or strongly agreed that the guidelines were a useful resource for the DFB sector. Importantly, the review provided 12 recommendations for future revision of the Good Practice Guidelines. And these recommendations included things around more information on safety planning, resources for working with children and young people, and also providing information on ASOS accreditation, guidance on working within intersectionality, and developing an easy read version of the guidelines. So we took all of these on board, either in full or modified. We do have an easy read version of the guidelines that we're just about to launch as well. And last year, like Anne said, in December, which actually was almost half a year ago now, we launched the second edition of our Good Practice Guidelines. So what's changed? It's taken a more nuanced approach to working with victim survivors that really emphasises the importance of having lived expertise to review and improve service delivery. It's updated to really embed intersectional approaches to quality domestic and family violence services throughout all of the principles, and it incorporates recognising children and young people as clients in their own right. We've also included some case studies in the guidelines to really bring the principles to life and show how they work in practice. And we've also included an overview of how the principles align to the ASOS standard. So I am going to show you, I'll go through each of the principles, not in too much detail. Everything's available on our website. We have a poster that is printable that you can keep sort of within your service as well. But just to show you what the inside looks like of the book. So this time round, we have each of the principles, but we've also included what this looks like in practice for both a service, but also as a practitioner. So it's we've really tried to focus on making it an easy to use guide as well. Now, hopefully this works, but I'm going to play a quick video that gives you a really great overview of the foundational concepts that are really kind of ingrained throughout the whole principles, and something a little bit more engaging than just listening to me. So let me know if the sound doesn't work and I will see how we go. You hear that?
Yeah.
So that just gives a really nice succinct overview of these foundational concepts. And like I said, these are really woven. Ooh, might be someone needs to pop onto mute there. That woven throughout all of the principles. They're the key concepts. Now, I will run through the principles. I won't go into huge amounts of detail, but I think it's just great to be able to see what each of the principles are. And here you can see we've got what the principle is and then the practice guidelines that sit below them. So like I mentioned, we have a poster that is a really nice, easy to print that includes these all on one page so that you can keep them handy. But principle 1, so obviously safety and wellbeing is paramount, practitioner safety and also our victim survivor safety. One of the things that we've changed around with the principle for safety and wellbeing is starting to make sure that the perpetrator's behaviour is visible. So the way that we're doing safety planning and risk assessments is making sure that we are asking questions around also just keeping accountability on the perpetrator. Access and equity. So intersectionality really is throughout the whole of the principles, but obviously does sort of fall into access and equity much more than the others. And I'm sure everyone knows a lot about intersectionality, but I've just popped this change the story graphic in there just to sort of show the intersecting layers and forms of oppression that really can, I guess, compound for victim survivors when experiencing domestic and family violence. So listening to how a victim survivor understands and experiences their identities and context is really critical in taking an intersectional approach. In terms of the practice guidelines, I won't read through them, but cultural safety is hugely important. So understanding diversity and the intersectionality of victim survivors' experiences, culturally safe responses, and understanding and limiting barriers to access. And really what's key to principle 2 is each individual's cultural group belonging has the capability to influence the way in which a person has experienced trauma and violence and can be really central to healing. So culture refers to people's beliefs, customs, attitudes, characteristics, and really can play a vital role in recovery from traumatic experiences. So it's really important that our services are culturally safe and inclusive. Some of the practice guidelines that's included in access and equity and to really sort of align to this principle is that services have guidelines about the use of professional accredited interpreters, including avoiding using children and other relatives for translation, and promoting the use of interpreters with the same gender as victim survivors where possible, and actively engaging in cultural and religious learnings of victim survivors to identify with victim survivors when and how to incorporate these into service delivery. Domestic and family violence and trauma-informed specialist practice. So the domestic and family violence informed is new as part of this principle. And this is really around sort of how we're speaking about the victim survivor, so making sure we're precise, naming resistance, actively avoid victim blaming and reframing, so moving away from victim language and really holding, like I said in principle 1, holding the perpetrator to account. Just recognising the impacts and effects of trauma on decision making and really understanding and addressing the impacts of vicarious trauma on yourself and your team as well. So it's important and hard work that we do. So really making sure that we take care of ourselves and really understand vicarious trauma and start to spot that where we need to. Principle 4, victim survivor-centered practice and empowerment. So a big change to this one was really pulling out and making sure that we're seeing children and young people as victim survivors in their own right, and weaving in that the new foundational concept of parent-sensitive and child-aware approach to the work that we do. Victim survivors are at the centre of all decisions relating to them, and really using an empowering, person-centred and strengths-based approach. confidentiality and informed consent. I think this is really important in just making sure that services reiterate and understand with victim survivors the safest way to communicate. So how and what is best for sharing information, and also just making sure that the victim survivor knows what information would need to be disclosed or shared and documented and what it means for them. Principle 6, so non-judgmental support. This is the work that you all do, and I think it's just great to reiterate that, but obviously believing the victim survivor, validating and acknowledging victim survivors' experiences and supporting their choices, and really understanding the complex reason victim survivors can sometimes return to DFB relationships. Collaboration, so collaborating with different services that may your victim survivors may be working with or visiting and accessing, and really building that collaboration and coordination around the victim survivor and keeping them centred. Principle 8, so upholding and advocating the rights of victim survivors, supporting the rights of victim survivors and their children for self-determination and positive physical, social and emotional well-being, and ensuring that policies, practices and procedures are in the best interest of the victim survivors. Prevention, being aware of and challenging the drivers of violence. So I've included the Our Watch drivers of violence here, the 4 key drivers. So making sure that we're aware of these. And are the slides changing?
Yeah, my slides have been changing. I think we're up to 27.
Yeah, right. Okay, so mine just haven't changed at all. I'm still on the first slide.
Oh, sorry about that.
So I'm just wondering if everyone else's are changing, or they're all. If everyone else's are, then there might be just something wrong with mine.
Maybe you can try the little navigation thing at the bottom. Nat.
Yeah, maybe I think you might be able to press yeah, the little arrow as well.
I will figure it out.
Send these out. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'll send these out afterwards as well, so you can have a copy. So in terms of prevention, really for services to, like I said, challenge the drivers of violence. Oh, not sure what's happened here. Can you see my screen?
I think the slides have stopped sharing.
Yes.
Might just need to reshare.
I'll reshare, no problem.
Perfect.
Maybe
that slide 1.
Maybe Nat, as you share, that might have just jump back over to prevention. Okay. No problem. And yeah, so where possible, promoting and participating in any local prevention activities. And then principle 10 is really around sort of continuous improvement. So working with victim survivors and engaging lived expertise to understand what's working, what can be improved, and really taking that time to review and reflect practice, share best practice, share learnings. And yeah, I guess this also really looks at governance and leadership within the services as well. So it's a whistle stop tour. We were going to do a breakout, but I won't. I won't do that, given we've got probably lots to get through today as well. But like I mentioned, the Good Practice Guidelines are on our website. We do have, if you would like copies of the book, you can pop me an email. I've got my email down there. We did send out every service one, but if there's any that we are offering, if people want to purchase some, they're welcome to do that too. one of the things that we're doing now is really to help embed the good practice guidelines, is to start to build resources to support each of the principals. So we have a sector development member advisory committee that meets quarterly and has a great selection of different services as part of that. And part of that role is to start to look at what resources we need, how can we start to develop things that are sort of really tailored to our sector. And we're launching a knowledge hub, which will have access for people to be able to, deep dive into each of the principles to gain information and have it all in one spot. So hopefully that will make it easier for everyone to help embed in their practice. My whistle-stop tour of the Good Practice Guidelines. So if there's any questions, please let me know, or I will send this link out and I'll send out the links to directly to the guidelines as well.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I've gone through it as well. It's a really, really helpful practical tool, like especially the way that you've broken up what services can do and then what individual practitioners can do. So I really appreciate the amount of work that's gone into it. Did anyone have any questions for Sarah or comments? Maybe you've had a look at it yourself and found a particular part useful. No questions. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Sarah. I think Olivia's also asked, I think you've kind of given a bit of an update from the sector development area. Was there anything else you wanted to add? Or?
I think so that's sort of a main focus from a Good Practice Guidelines, is building the resources to support embedding that. I would encourage anyone who's on the call to share what they're doing to embed it. I know Gillian from Women Up North is sort of focusing on a principle each month, which has been fantastic, and I think there's some great things happening within services to embed these as well. But more from a sector development broadly, we are we've got a project with Aqua to develop some resources and training around working with children and young people as survivors in their own right. So that will form part of the deep dives into the resources we have, but also for child protection services as well. So really recognising and helping to identify and respond. We've just had our primary prevention forum, which was a really great success, and we had around 80 people attend that. And we're working with DCJ on the consulting on the primary prevention strategy. We've just finished a series of disability awareness workshops that we partner with PWDA, and we'll also be partnering with them again to build resources to be part of the knowledge hub as well. So watch this space. We're hoping the next sort of 6 months will be much more around developing resources, more films and things that people can watch as a bit of an overview.
Thanks so much. And it's really helpful to have that work. Because, I know for me, I appreciate the videos as a sort of easy integrated way to see things in practice and get across a principle and how it can work. Thanks so much, and thanks for the update. Sorry if I sprung that on you at the wrong point. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Wonderful. All right, I just double check that I haven't missed any questions. No, wonderful. All right, well, I will give a bit of an update from, I guess, the federal level, national level of recent changes. So we've had some recent changes to legislation around visas and proposed changes or changes that are yet to come into effect. So I'll go through those, just briefly chat on the budget, and then an update from the National Advocacy Group. Feel free to jump in or ask questions as I go. It's pretty informal. I don't have any slides prepared. So first thing is, you might have seen at the end of March, the Department of Home Affairs and the Minister updated the family violence provisions. Just as very quick background, the family violence provisions are the provisions that apply primarily to partner visa applicants, so people in Australia with an Australian on a temporary visa or bridging visa with an Australian citizen partner or permanent resident partner, and they've applied for a partner visa. The family violence provisions are a way to continue with that application for ultimately a permanent visa, permanent partner visa, without still being in the relationship with the sponsor, the perpetrator, and without needing to still be sponsored. So with the family violence provisions, there is space for people to provide what's called non-judicial evidence, which is basically if they have not got a final AVO or their ex-partner has not been found guilty of criminal offences relating to the family violence, so they haven't got something from a court or judicial evidence, then they can rely on non-judicial evidence, which is things like documents from support services or professionals. And there was a list of who those people can be and what they can provide. It was quite narrow before. For example, just trying to think of what it was before. It was limited to women's refuges or DV crisis services or centres. And in other ways, it was narrow in terms of what could be provided. So for some people, they could only provide a statutory declaration. Now, the changes to these provisions are that more people can provide a supporting document, so more organisations or professionals, and the kind of document that they can provide is also broadened. So we have updated the fact sheet on our website to reflect these changes. I won't go into too much detail, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask now. Yeah, our fact sheet on our website is updated. We will also be running a training session with through the Women's Legal Centre's Ask Lois webinars. I think that's tomorrow. No, it's next week. It's next week on Wednesday, but they're also recorded. So you can also have a look at that. I might send through the link afterwards as well if you're interested in learning more. I think there was a comment from Kitu. So Kitu's noted they're still strict on the psychologist reports, leaving out psychotherapists and counsellors. Yeah, that's right. So they haven't included counsellors as a professional who can, or as a kind of professional who can provide a supporting letter, which is frustrating. In my experience, a lot of the time, someone who is providing counselling support, for example, through victims services, often they have the qualification that meets the definition of a social worker in that instrument, the non-judicial evidence instrument. So that's often what we're looking at. If not, we look at where they work and could that service be classified as a family violence support service. It's still, there are things that haven't changed, so that's one of them. So still requiring documents from either a registered psychologist, a social worker, which is defined as someone who's a member of the Australian Association of Social Workers or eligible to be a member. So still narrow in that respect. What's broadened, one thing that has broadened that is helpful is the category that used to be for women's refuges and DV crisis services has now been expanded to what they call now family violence support services, which also, so still includes crisis, it still includes women's refuges and things that would be classified as like a crisis support service, but it also includes community support services and multicultural support services. So the local like multicultural resource centre, for example, now might fall into that definition. And a couple of the other things that haven't changed. So clients still need to provide 2 different types of evidence. So it can be problematic if they've only been supported by one service, even though in practice that's a good thing from the perspective of providing non-judicial evidence of family violence. It can be tricky because we still need 2 different kinds of documents. So for example, we couldn't have 2 documents from a family violence support service. We'd need 2 different kinds. So with it, again, our fact sheet's updated on that. And there is the training, which I'll send around the link for afterwards. Were there any other questions or comments? been updated for a little while, so I'm not sure if anyone had any other comments in addition to Kit 2's. No. Or questions. I'm happy to answer any questions. But just to move on to another change that's going to take effect on the 1st of July. So this is for New Zealand citizens. A lot of people nodding already aware of it. Basically, from the 1st of July, New Zealand citizens on the on the special category visa, the 444 visa, will have their time in Australia counted as being on a permanent visa for the purposes of citizenship. So this is meaning that they don't have to apply for a different permanent visa to then apply for citizenship in Australia. It'll also affect children in a positive way, born in Australia from the 1st of July of last year, so 2022, where one parent is on a 444 visa, again, that special category visa. They are considered to be, or they will be considered to be citizens by birth. All this information is just from what the Department of Home Affairs has released and what's in the announcement. So we haven't seen the actual legislative changes. We don't know what specifically that will look like, but it is pretty detailed on the website. We will be running a training session, I think towards the end of June, on New Zealand citizens as well. So that'll go into more detail. And there are still areas where we're not sure what these changes might mean. Particularly that's for people who are a partner of a New Zealand citizen. So where they have the 461, so New Zealand relationship visa. There's not any information that I'm aware of about what's going to happen in terms of their situation or status. Of course, if a New Zealand citizen becomes an Australian citizen, they can then sponsor their partner on a partner visa. But for a lot of clients that we see, and I'm sure many of your services see, they might not be in that relationship anymore. So there might still be a bit of a gap there. We'll have to see what happens. Are there any questions about New Zealand citizens? Okay. All right, and another update is just a quick one from the budget. So there's a small mention in the budget of the department of the minister expanding the family violence provisions, which is exciting, although the mention is very short. I might just copy and paste it and pop it into the chat. Some of you are probably aware of it already. It's a bit messy. Basically, as I mentioned, the family violence provisions currently only apply to people who've applied for a partner visa and a global talent visa, which is very limited as well. So this announcement is saying that the government is investing money to expand the family violence provisions to most permanent visa subclasses, including, they're saying, secondary applicants for permanent visas, offshore partner visa applicants, which is temporarily expanded already, and prospective marriage visas, visa holders. So we're seeing what happens here, hopefully there'll be consultations as well. We don't know what it looks like yet. This was all that was mentioned. So it's exciting that there might be a positive change, but it does depend on what that actually looks like. So I'll keep you updated on any information I have, any input we're giving on that. The other key thing, the thing that happens every year for the budget, is the visa charges will increase, as well as there's a couple other things, but that's one that's not useful, although it happens every year.
And just a question on that, on the family violence visa changes. Do we know if that will include student visas?
We don't know for sure because this is all we have to go off. My guess is no, because they're saying it's about permanent visas. So a student visa of itself doesn't have an obvious pathway to a permanent visa. Like people who have student visas might then move on to a temporary graduate visa and then maybe employer sponsored or put in an expression of interest for a skilled visa, points-based visa. But of itself, it's a temporary visa and is not like a partner visa, which has the temporary and the permanent as a clear, it's all one application. It's clear pathway to a permanent visa. So even this will still have gaps for people.
So, for example, like all those women that are brought over on tourist visas, this wouldn't protect them, would it? Because it's a temporary visa. Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah, so it's still, you know, definitely not the silver bullet, which is why in the National Advocacy Group's blueprint, the first recommendation was like a temporary visa for people who've experienced family violence or sexual violence, domestic violence. So there's something immediately to move on to, like whereas if you're staying on a student visa, you still have conditions to comply with. So that's still not ideal. So that's why that recommendation was crafted in the National Advocacy Group to address the fact that one of the recommendations was expand the family violence provisions because it doesn't apply to things like a parent visa, child visa, or dependence on like someone else's skilled visa application. But the other one of the other key recommendations was a temporary visa for people who've experienced family violence with potentially a pathway to a permanent visa, which exists in other, I think in New Zealand or the UK, I can't remember which. So there is a model for it, but yeah, definitely a gap that you've highlighted. Any other comments or questions around the budget? Yep. Wonderful. I guess just on that note around specifically student visas, is the government and Claire O'Neill, sorry, is looking at the migration systems review with, I think, the overall goal of having clearer pathways for permanent residency, but that's not specific to victim survivors of family violence. I don't think there's any mention of family violence in that document. But it's not the purpose or focus. No questions? All right. And the last thing, just as a really quick update from what's happening at the National Advocacy Group for Women on Temporary Visas. So as mentioned at the end of last year, the blueprint, the updated blueprint was created with updated recommendations. They've recently been sent to the federal ministers and hoping for a meeting with the ministers to discuss them, because it's not just the Minister for Immigration, there's lots of different areas of the federal government that are touched on, and they need to act to make those recommendations into, take those recommendations into action. So now it's at the point of advocacy and pushing for those recommendations to be actioned. All right, I think that's it from me, unless anyone's got any questions or comments. No, wonderful. Oh, as a question, did you want to pop off mute?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Anne. It's Jan from Moving Forward here. Something that has become more common to our service is the spouses of people that are on the skilled visas. And are we advocating for more protection from them, or a different type of visa for them?
Yeah, so if, I guess the advocacy is if there are like possibly dependents in an application for a skilled visa, then the blueprint is that the family violence provision should be expanded, but also that there should be a visa specifically for victim survivors of family violence. The recommendation is that that's a temporary visa first, potentially with a pathway where there's still ties or connections to Australia. The reason that we start with temporary, there was a lot of debate around it, because obviously, like, ideally you just want to go straight to permanent residency and that stability, so people can then get the services and support that they need. But it's been a strategic decision in that it's very unlikely, even particularly with the previous government, but even with the current one, when the blueprint was being revised, to actually get an outcome like that they would just, move straight to, for victim survivors of family violence, to put in an application directly for some, new permanent visa. So the advocacy is sort of, I guess, two elements to it. One is around expanding the family violence provisions. So if there is an application that's been made for a permanent visa and someone is a dependent on that they'll still have a pathway to continue with that application. But also that there is a temporary visa that's something quick that has access to services for victim survivors of family violence. For example, people on tourist visas or student visas where there isn't a pending application to continue with.
I can understand the whole temporary visa understanding, because there'd be so many people that, could be using that, as the government say. But these spouses of people, that they are just so vulnerable, so incredibly vulnerable, and they don't even have their own recognition in a way, do they?
Yeah, I agree. It's a really tricky situation. I would say if they are on, for any of them, if they want advice specific about their situation, you're welcome to refer them to us. Okay. If they're on the permanent skilled visa, so if they hold, for example, a 189, which is one of the skilled visas, which is permanent. If you already have a permanent visa and there's changes after that grant, then.
But it's not their visa; it's their husband's visa.
So let's say I've got a husband, he holds a 189 and I hold the 189 but I got it because I'm a member of his family unit.
Oh, okay.
Still a permanent visa. And even though I might have been a dependent to get that visa, I still have that permanent visa. It not tied to him. There's no ongoing sponsorship obligations or anything like that. If I separate after the grant of that permanent visa, doesn't matter. The department, there's not a risk of cancellation for changes after the grant of a permanent visa.
Okay.
So if someone already holds a permanent visa, whether it's a partner visa or they got it as a dependent on and someone else on their skilled visa, employer-sponsored visa, that's my favourite advice to give, because usually the changes, if they decide to separate, if they're concerned about maybe threats that their partner's made, most of the time there's no risk to that visa, and we're usually going, can you apply for citizenship? That's what we're looking at next.
Oh, good. Okay. 189.
But
okay.
Yeah, so feel free, anyone who's on a visa's got a question about it and not sure, that's what we're here for. We're here to give advice on that and go through those options, and because each person's situation is a bit different, so it is important to make sure we're giving that tailored advice. But there is a gap, and it's a really risky situation where someone is they're on a temporary visa and they're included in an application as a dependent, for example, on that skilled visa. That's a really, really tricky situation, and that's hopefully where this expansion might help. But also there's still that other avenue of the National Advocacy Group's blueprint, which is around, we need a temporary visa and another pathway as well. Because I'm guessing even if these are expanded, there'll still be gaps like Livy's highlighted for student visas or people on visitor visas.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for the question. Any other comments or questions? Yep. Wonderful.
Sorry, Anne, I had one just quickly. It's probably not a quick question, but I just want to let you know that we had a client come in recently and she's been on a temporary visa for 30 years. So how does somebody end up being a temporary resident for 30 years? I don't have too much detail. She's coming in later. But what sort of things should we be looking for in that?
I would, I'm a bit surprised that someone would be on a temporary, or I would imagine that subsequent temporary visas, but for 30 years is a very long time. And I'm wondering, a couple of things, like when they arrived in Australia, I guess any documents that they have, and starting from there, my concern would be that they had a temporary visa, maybe as a student visa or a visitor visa or something many years ago, and that expired, and they've just remained in Australia. We do see that a bit. We've seen people who've been without a visa for like 20 years. So that's kind of what I'm concerned might have happened. But at the same time, there were, like in 1994 is really when we had the current visa structure. And I mean, the visas have changed over time. But that's when most of the migration, well, that's when the migration regulations as we currently have them came into effect. So 30 years, I can't do math very quickly, but slightly longer than that. So there might be weird quirks that come into play when someone's been here for that long, like if there's something else that they might hold. So
Okay, I don't want to
could be
hold
a bit
you
of a
up
tricky
because
one.
I'm just
yeah,
going to refer them to you.
Yeah, no worries.
Because I
I'll
think
look
that's
out for
probably
it.
the best thing to do, because
Yeah.
all of those questions are coming to my mind, and we're going to get a paperwork and then possibly but just as a quickie, maybe other people are interested too. Is there any chance she's going to be able to stay here, or is it looking unlikely? She's probably been off a visa.
When it's a bit risky. I mean, I'd be scared to say in the abstract.
No.
But those ones are, I do get a little nervous about them when someone's been here for an extended period of time, potentially without a visa, because the options can be quite limited. Not impossible, but they can be quite limited when someone's been here for an extended period unlawfully. If that's the case, we don't know for her.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. All right, I can't see any other questions. So I might move on and pass over to Livia for an update from DV New South Wales.
Thanks, Anne. Such really important updates. It's nice to see there's actually something happening at the federal level. I mean, it's not enough, but it's something, which is a start. So apologies, my voice is not what it should be. Just a few updates from us. So I'm on the core and cluster team at the moment. As many of you would know, Tranche 3 is currently open. And we are really pleased that the EOI has actually been extended due to ongoing advocacy, by us and our partner Peaks as well. So it's now closing on the 25th of July, which is a 6-week extension. So really encourage, any organisations out there who might be interested in core and cluster to look at what's required for that EOI. We know that it is a priority for the government to have really culturally tailored, appropriate core and cluster refuges. So this is, something that they're looking at, particularly within certain geographies where we know that there's more of those demographics. Moving on, so we've recently had a misidentification forum, which was a really fantastic forum, great turnout. So just to let you all know, at the moment, I think we're still fine-tuning the call to action, which came from that, and that should go out to ministers soon. Currently, the policy team is contacting all of the new state ministers in the government requesting meetings. I believe they've had their first meeting with Jodie Harrison, and we'll be having ongoing meetings, which is really wonderful, looking at kind of starting a really positive relationship with her. We're really looking at how we're planning and strategizing to work with this new government and looking at what our key advocacy priorities are. We have 6 kind of key advocacy priorities that we try and tie all our work in with. We're also collaborating with the New South Wales government on a range of initiatives, including a new DFE workforce survey. and a project to improve DFE data collection. So we know that DCJ, that's a big piece of ongoing work for them. Obviously, the DFE workforce is somewhat, at a crisis level in terms of, we know that a lot of people are exiting, the sector. We know that it's an aging workforce. So we're really pleased to see that, DCJ are actually focused on this and looking at what training and support the sector needs, and how to attract people into the sector as well. Part of that will hopefully involve minimum standards for the sector as well. We are also monitoring closely work that's being done regarding the implementation of coercive control laws, and continuing to advocate for best practice. There's quite a bit going on with police at the moment, so we're doing ongoing work with police to build those relationships and address issues that arise. And in the housing space, I don't know if many of you have heard, the government have announced a new shared equity task force, which is to support women who have experienced DFE to be able to access the shared equity scheme. And so DV New South Wales has been invited to co-chair this task force with Minister Harrison. So we see that as a really positive step. Obviously, it will only support a small cohort of women, but we're really pleased that that will be happening. I think that's it for all of our updates at DV New South Wales. Are there any questions?
Libby, it's Jan here. I know you're talking to Jodie Harrison. What about Rose Jackson? Because she's the Minister for Housing. Is she wanting to talk to you as well?
Yes, we've written to Rose Jackson. I don't think we've had a meeting with her as yet,
Okay.
but absolutely, she's high on our agenda as well, being the Minister for Housing, and we know that housing outcomes for women, experiencing DV, or housing outcomes for anyone these days, are not great. So we're also engaging with her as part of the Core and Cluster project as well. It sits under Harrison, but it also sits under Rose Jackson. So yes.
And I know Core and Cluster, if it's strictly kept as domestic and family violence, is a great crisis response, but we want more long-term responses in housing, don't we? So it'd be good if we got Rose on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what I know of Rose is that she is extremely passionate about housing.
She's feisty.
She's the real deal. I don't know what she's going to be able to do with it. Obviously, it is an extremely difficult portfolio.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been much announced so far for housing. So it's a wait and see. A lot of it is kind of coming from the federal level. We've got the Housing Australia Future Fund, kind of going through the legislation process at the moment. Again, that's not going to be enough houses, but it's a start.
Yeah. Thanks, Libby.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else?
There's just a question in the chat about whether the recording for the Misidentification Forum will be released.
I believe it already has been released in our weekly email updates. So if you send me an email, I'll just pop my email in there, and you can reach out to me if you haven't received a copy. Anyone who is interested in Core and Cluster, who'd like to have a meeting, please reach out to me as well. There's not a whole lot of time left.
Wonderful. I can't see any other questions. Thanks so much, Livia, for the update and also for jumping in on this one. I know you're kind of wearing a little bit of two hats today, which I really appreciate.
No worries.
All right, so we'll finish up with a bit of a discussion or any points that people want in terms of planning and advocacy for the coming year for this group. So last year we ended on looking at, I guess, opportunities to review the National Advocacy Group's blueprint on reform to align advocacy at this state level with that. I might send that around again. I think particularly from that, the areas that are, I guess, intersect with federal and state level things are particularly around housing and health. So I guess pretty obvious issues of the lack of access to both when someone's on a temporary visa. But I'll send it around again, and I just wondered in the meantime if anyone had any ideas or comments of things that, from what they're saying, they would like us to work on or think could be an advocacy point for this group. I don't think I'm seeing any hands up. All right, I guess there's a point here from Sarah. Did you want to come off mute?
Yes, hi. I just want to mention that most of us are going to the end of the Multicultural New South Wales funding, MNSW, funding very soon by the end of June. And with that funding, we've been helping a lot of clients maintain their accommodation, whether they are at refuges or private rentals. And I just want to point that a lot of single moms are going to be out there as of July without any support for accommodation. So I think it would be great to advocate on behalf of these women on temporary visas who are experiencing gender-based violence and have no place to go, and organizations are running out of money to support them. Thank you.
Sarah, can I just clarify, did you say that funding from Multicultural New South Wales is running out?
Yes.
June 30th? Okay. And is that for, like what services is that for? Is that for support for domestic violence services or just multicultural services?
It's multicultural services here at JRS. We've got funding to help women on temporary visas and women seeking asylum who have experienced gender-based violence with that funding as well. So I know a lot of organizations like House of Welcome, for example, they're also helping their clients from that funding.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing that to our attention. That's probably something that we need to look at DV New South Wales as well. Because there's so many different funding streams for DFV service provision. And that's one I don't think that we have on our spreadsheet. So we'll have to look at that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah and Livia. Were there any other points, anything else similar that's changing that would be useful to advocate on? All right, and I guess, you know, if you think of ideas, feel free to email us as well. Were there any points for like upcoming meetings, like any spaces for information that you wanted us to try and get guest speakers on or information on? Yep. No burning questions. All right, we'll see what areas are of interest, and again, we'll keep you updated on the changes or probably consultations that will happen at the federal level. And lastly, before we close, sorry, let someone come in for me. Were there any information updates or about your services that you'd like to share with everyone in the group? Sorry, Sarah, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to say that at the Finding Safety project here at JRS, we work with women who have experienced gender-based violence, not only domestic and family violence, but all types of gender-based violence, such as forced marriage, early marriage, female genital mutilation, breast ironing, trafficking. So it's, a big range of gender-based violence. We help women who are on, as I said earlier, on temporary visas, whether student visa, partner visas, or women seeking asylum as well. So we help with financial assistance. Unfortunately, we don't have accommodation, but we usually refer to refuges and shelters out there. It has been very difficult to place our clients in refuges recently, and that's because most of them do not have work rights. Most of them do not speak English, and if they do, childcare is an issue. So the exit pathways are very difficult and non-existent in some of our clients, and it has been really, really difficult. A lot of our clients have been rejected, and it puts a lot of pressure on us because, as I mentioned earlier as well, that we're running out of funding. So I just want to say that. So if you have any questions or do you need any information about the services we provide, I'm more than happy to provide you with my email address, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, the ending of funding is a particularly scary thing, especially I know the work that JRS does, so it's quite scary that some of that will be limited if nothing comes through soon. Thanks for the update.
Sorry, Anne. Sarah, would you mind just dropping me an email, just because I'd like to get the details of that funding stream and understanding a little bit more about it.
Sure.
I'm wondering, are there many services on the call that receive funding from Multicultural New South Wales? Any other services?
Can I have your email address?
Yeah. It's just in the chat. It's coreandcluster@dvnsw.org.au.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Oh yeah. Livia, there's just someone in the chat as well, Gillian, who's mentioned Women Up North with one-off funding from Multicultural New South Wales. And Gillian's also mentioned that there's a regional forum coming up in 3 months. Like to invite us all. Gillian, did you want to come off mute and maybe just tell us like when the forum is and I guess if there's a particular theme of it this year? I don't think I can see Gillian. Yep. All right. Well, if we get any information, we can send it around in the follow-up email afterwards. Oh, sorry, mic's not working. Sorry, Gillian. Welcome to type it into the chat and I can read it out. Or if there's a link or some accessible information, we can send it through afterwards. Thanks, Gillian. All right, so we'll send that information out afterwards about the regional forum that's coming up. Does anyone else have any updates or comments from their service that they'd like to share?
I'm just noticing a few people in the chat are saying that they are receiving that one-off multicultural funding. It'd be really useful if anyone who has received funding from Multicultural New South Wales to support women and children experiencing DFE, if they can drop me a line at coreandcluster@dvnsw.org.au, just so that we can follow that up and make sure we're kind of on top of that funding, given it's coming to an end on the 30th of June. So if you can just include in your email what the funding is specifically for, and how maybe approximately how many clients you can support or you do support from that funding, and what kind of programs you're running with that funding. Thank you.
All right, I'll just double check. I haven't missed any comments. Okay. All right. Sorry, Sarah, your hand's still up. Was there anything you want to add, or is that just up from before? Okay, sorry. Didn't want to cut you off early. All good. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there.